Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us for another Devops Perth event. It has been a little while. It's the first event of 2022, but it's good to be back. Today we've got a speaker coming to us from the UK, so hence the online session that we're running today. Given that we're virtual, I'd still like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land and pay respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Thanks, Tim. We'd like to thank our sponsors who help us run the community, so Cohesion, Interfuse, and MOQ Digital. And I'd just like to call out, we are still trying to grow our presence in the community, build community around us. So please hit us, join us in our LinkedIn group, Devops Perth. And this talk will also be published to our YouTube channel. We also got all the recordings from previous sessions there. So if you're interested, have a browse of the channel, see what's there and watch some previous talks. We're just going to break up into, jump in the gun there, Tim.
Yeah, jump in the gun, mate. Hold on, tick. I'm trying to push it back.
That's okay.
There we go.
We're just going to jump into a couple of breakout rooms, which Tim's going to put us into, just so we can have a bit of sense of community, a bit of networking, meet the people around us and have a bit of a chat. So do that for about 5-10 minutes, and then we'll come back into the main area to watch Derek's talk. Well, thank you everyone for coming along. It's good to see some new faces in the community. Hopefully we'll have a good session tonight and promote some good conversation. I'd like to welcome Derek Campbell all the way from Glasgow in Scotland, who's presenting for us today on pipelines, infrastructure as code, and deployments with GitHub Actions and Octopus Deploy. So thanks, Derek. We'll take questions through chat, unless Derek, you want people just to yell out when they have a question, but otherwise just pop a message in chat and we can have a Q&A at the end.
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good. Thank you, Dario. All
right, over to you, mate.
Hello, everybody. I will need to get the ability to share my screen.
2 ticks.
No problem. So just a heads up, I'm trying this as I normally have a slide deck. No slide deck today. We're just going to be a bit more chatty. I'll take you through the demo, but obviously I'll show you that in just a moment.
Sorry, Derek.
So
trying to work out with.
It's under share screen. What you can do is, if you're the host, you should be able to pop it up and then allow other people to show when you're to take over screen sharing.
Yeah, you go for it, mate. You should be multiple participants. I'll click that. So
we're in. Thank you so much. Okay, hello everybody. We have GitHub Actions. So let's start with a little bit of background. Hello, I'm Derek Campbell. I'm the principal solution architect in the Octopus Deploy community team. I, unsurprisingly, work for Octopus Deploy. Check out the t-shirt. Yep, and so a little bit about me. I lead up the community team. The community team effectively try and go out and just help people understand how to use Octopus, actually adopt DevOps best practices, and really just kind of try and help people with technology. The main reason is I'm very passionate about helping people. Technology is hard. And it's constantly moving, and what I like to do is just help people. And I have the mandate with Octopus that's what we kind of get out and do. So it's really, really cool. So today I'm going to be giving you a demo of GitHub Actions. What we're going to be doing there is setting up the build, running the build, and then at this point I'll show you how to integrate GitHub Actions and Octopus, and then from there we're actually going to deploy infrastructure to Azure using Platform as a Service. We're going to do this all on the fly using Runbooks, deployment processes, and then lastly, we're going to push it to production. So at the end, what we should have is dynamically created infrastructure for test, not production. You shouldn't ever dynamically create your infrastructure as part of your deployment. You know, production normally has to stay online. So yeah, and what we'll do is we'll have some Q&A at the end of today's session. And then from there, hopefully you learn some stuff and hopefully everyone has some good times. So sit back, relax. I hope you have a beer. I have, obviously, you know, being Scottish, I have my Iron Brew. Normally I do these talks with whiskey, but I try not to drink whiskey before 11 a.m. in the day. I don't always succeed, but you know, sometimes you just have bad days. Anyway, so what we've got here is the Octopus Deploy repository in GitHub. So this is actually something that's all open. You can go in and you can play around with this. So that's just something. So it's on github.com/Octopus Deploy community. Today I'm going to be showing Octopet Shop. So Octopet Shop, because obviously, you know, you need to buy your octopus online, right? Octopet Shop is a multi-tier application. It consists of a front end, which is the website. It has a product service, it has a shopping cart service, and then lastly, it has a database. So what we're going to do is we're going to run through the build. We are then going to pass 4 artifacts into Octopus, and then we're going to deploy them. So GitHub Actions are a way for you to build your software and also deploy your software. So let's actually have let's jump in and have a look at GitHub Actions. So the good thing with GitHub Actions is your CI actually sits alongside your code. So the great thing is you can see exactly how everything is working all in code. So what you've got is when you set up your actions for the first time, your .github folder will then create your workflow. So we come in, we have our build. So here we go. Here's the build. I'm not going to actually look at this. One thing, this is a little trick that I found out from Damien Brady. If you press dot in GitHub, boom, we have code. So one thing is, if you are using it, press the dot. Why? Because you don't even have to do any changes locally. You can do everything in the browser. As you can see here, is you can actually use code straight in on GitHub. So what we've got is we have our .NET Core build. So this is something I set up, and one thing just to be aware of is we actually have a free tool that you can use if you don't want to use so I thought someone else had popped back on there. So if you don't want to write all this out yourself,
sorry, I'm just going to kick someone else off who looks like they're trying to play funny buggers as well. So okay. Oh, you're right, go again. I'll get on to
if you don't want to write your GitHub action, this is all written in YAML, which stands for yet another. There's markup language. Obviously, I use another M there sometimes because I absolutely hate YAML. But I love it. I love it in equal measures. I love using it because it's so powerful. It's the key thing for me is with the YAML is it's reusable. And it's easily read as well. With obviously with YAML, you can write all this out straight if you're really hardcore into your coding. I don't do that because I like to copy and paste a lot. So I normally try and start by copy and pasting someone else's. I'll be honest and up front here. One thing that we do have is we're actually creating some free tools at the moment to help people. So one thing just to be aware of is you can see. You see here, we'll go to the repository. So you've got your so what you've got here is GitHub Actions, actionworkflows.com. This actually is a site that will read your repository and actually build out your actions for you. So in this instance, we're using the same repository. If we effectively go if you hit go, this tool effectively will select the language that you need for your CI. In this instance, I am just going to tell it it's .NET Core. It's a .NET Core project, so it should pick that up. But if you sit here, you give it a second, it gives you your action. So this works with any repository. It even works now with private repositories. So if you have something in GitHub, and if you want to have a look at it, definitely check out githubactionworkflows.com. And from there, we are just about to put it on our website under octopus.com/free tools. There's some bits that are holding us back just now, but this tool is very new. And what you can see here is this actually writes your entire YAML for you. It's not so much built, you may have to make some changes to it, but the idea is it should get you about 80% of the way there. I'm not going to spend much time looking at this because I want to go back and actually look at it in GitHub. So what I've been doing is over the last few days, I've been working on this. What I've done is I've set up the .NET Core build. This is a .NET Core 6 build. So I'm actually set it so that the pull request, and this will only run when I do a pull request into the main branch. I also have it run so it runs every morning at 8 a.m. The reason I have that is it's nice because it creates all the infrastructure for us. So I log on, I come in, and if ever I need to look at this, all the infrastructure, the CI and the CD is already in place. So what we do is obviously got the pull request in place. Obviously from here we're then starting the jobs. We're specifying Ubuntu latest. This still feels strange to me that I can run .NET on Linux. I don't know about you, but it still feels a little bit strange. But yeah, so what we're doing is we're starting with the actions. So that, we're actually checking out the code. So one thing just to be aware of is you can come in to the GitHub. One moment. So you should be able to see everything. And if you want to come in, you can actually edit this. So with one second. So with workflows, you can come in and actually select this. So you select edit in the browser if you want to do it here without code. And one of the things that I really like is there's a whole bunch of actions. I actually checked just before and I realized there's almost 12,500 actions. So I do not know even 4% of the action. So if you do want to do it, definitely check out the GitHub Action marketplace. For instance, if you just put Octopus, you can see here that there's actually 8 actions. We have the install Octopus CLI. Only 4 of these are official. Obviously, these are all created by the community as well as companies. So in this instance, we have been working with this for some time now. We have the install CLI. We normally used to have a plugin, but with obviously actions, there's no way to really install a plugin. So what we've got is install the CLI, which you can use to write all your commands. You're pushing the package to Octopus Deploy, you're creating the release and then run a runbook. So the create release also does the deployment. And then what you also have is there's 4 others, one by Exo Energy, and then 2 by, I think it was Richard Burton, and then obviously the deploy release action. So, but the main, if you want to use the supported ones, if you want to set this up, then I would definitely check this out. Okay, so let's go through and actually have a look at the what we're actually doing with this GitHub action. So first and foremost, you can actually do, so say for instance your Octopus, what you can do is you select Octopus CLI, it will actually give you the example, and then effectively you can just copy and paste this and then move it on over. So that's just something to be aware of. I'm a big fan of copying and pasting. The copying and pasting development is the easiest development I've ever had to do. So let's jump in and have a look. So from here, we're checking out the code. We're setting the version. We're setting up .NET 6. We've just basically specified that 6 is the only version that we'll work with. We're installing the dependencies with a .NET restore. We're running a build, specifying the configuration of release. We're creating the artifacts folder. The main reason I create artifacts folder is I find it incredibly hard when building software. Where did my actual software go? So I just basically create these manually with a shell script. And then the next few steps are all very similar. What we're effectively doing now is just running the publish of each of the different projects. So we've got our Octopus, we've got our Octo Pet Shop database. We have our website, we have a product service, which is an API-driven service which we can pull our products from, and then lastly our shopping cart service. And then what we've now done here is, and I did just upgrade this just before the talk, so hopefully it'll work, but I guess we'll find out. But what I've done here is I've upgraded to the latest one with the CLI, just obviously specifying the latest. We're then packaging this. I tend to use Octopack. So Octopack would be covered under your CLI. I generally find Octopack is the best way to do it. And I always use zip files. Obviously, you can use NuGet, but for the most part, I generally find zip works a little bit better, has a little bit more features as well, and is a bit more compatible. So what we're doing here is we're packaging up the database, the website, the product service, and lastly the shopping cart service. At this point, you'll notice that we're then pushing the package. So We're using again the Octopus Deploy GitHub action. We're specifying the API key, and this is actually the format you specify your secrets in. Is obviously your dollar symbol. I will show you that in just a moment where to set that. And then lastly, we are uploading the database with the package version and then zip. And lastly, the same with the other 4. So as part of this, we will create 4 packages, upload them to Octopus, and then actually kick off a deployment. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come on over. I'm going to come back to Actions. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run it. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's about to happen. I'll jump over to Octopus and talk you through some of the bits there. But at this point, obviously, normally you would change something. You would do your PR. In this instance, I'm not going to do that. It just takes a little bit more time. I'm just going to run the workflow manually. So at this point, it's going to go and grab an agent from GitHub. Let's give this a wee moment. Okay, so it's running. I'm hoping that I've sacrificed enough to the demo gods. So what I've found recently is sometimes when running this manually, it doesn't. There we go. There we go. I was a little nervous, but definitely sacrificed enough to the demo gods there. So what's now happening is we are now effectively running through the GitHub action. So it'll start with checking out the code. It's going to set up .NET 6. It's then going to install the dependencies, build it with the release configuration. We are doing then our tests as well. Obviously, never always remember to do your tests. Creating the artifacts folder, we're publishing it. We are then packaging and then pushing. So if we come back over, there we go. So at this point, what it's doing is it's running, it's grabbing the code. Actually, it's pretty much already be done. So at this point, it's setting the version. As we've seen, it's set up .NET 6. It's installing the dependencies. It's specifying the build. This should take about 90 seconds or thereabouts. So at this point, I'm going to have a little drink of iron brew. Okay. So at this point, we're run through the build. Build's been completed. We've run through our tests. I wish all of our tests will never took 4 seconds. We're then creating the artifacts folder. We're publishing the database, the website, and then the product service, and then lastly, shopping cart service. So we're publishing that. We're then installing Octopus CLI. We're packaging it up. We are packaging the web, and then the product service, and then the shopping cart service, and then we're done. So we've then pushed this up. So what you'll see is, one thing here is we've just grabbed all of the files, pushed it up, and then if you have a little look, at the very bottom, I actually create the release. So run octo create release, project octo pet shop version server. You'll notice again, we've got this, we've got the API key. You can use username and passwords, but API keys are generally our preference. And then lastly, I don't have a development environment for you today, mostly just to keep it nice and tight. And then what's going to happen is it's actually going to kick off the deployment to test. So yeah, that is effectively GitHub Actions. One thing just to be aware of is you will need to set, obviously you need to set some secrets up. We come on down, so that's under settings, you can come into secrets and then actions. And then the good thing is I can show you this because once you input this, you'll never ever be able to get it out. So the Octopus Server Api Key, that's exactly what it is. It's the API key, obviously that you have created for your GitHub Actions account, sorry, your GitHub account. And then from here, it's Octopus Server URL. The Octopus Server URL today will be webinar.octopus.app. And then lastly, the Octopus server _space. Spaces is something in Octopus that you can create and effectively gives you an empty version of Octopus again. So that's something when we released this back in 2019. It's a way to logically group your projects. We see people do things like maybe client specific ones, like for instance, obviously you mentioned BHP earlier on. BHP might be something that you put your customer in. Other things we see is people putting in Windows or Linux ones. Really, however it fits, however that's best logically split up, that's where spaces. In this instance, we're actually deploying this to spaces -202. So yeah, that's pretty much everything about GitHub Actions. And obviously with that, please do check out the generator. And like I said earlier on, YAML is horrible. If someone else can write it for you and you can copy and paste it, always take that option. Unless you really, really like YAML, then I think you probably have to have a word to yourself. Anyway, I'm just joking. But yeah, so actually, what I'm thinking there, Dario, is that could be a good question, a good bit to take some questions about GitHub Actions. And it also gives me a little bit of a breather to take some juice.
Yeah, there haven't really been any questions posted in chat, but if anyone has a question, and hopefully a question on any other type of audio, just fire away at Derek.
We did have one from Will, I think.
Sorry, I missed that.
All
Will,
good.
you can ask your question, mate.
No, all good. I'm loving the Iron Brew, Derek. A little fact for you: the Iron Brew here in Perth, the Scottish when they come here, they love it because we don't have the rules to tone down the sugar, so they buy it in truckloads and take it home with them.
I honestly, it's funny. I'm not actually in Glasgow. I'm just outside.
Okay.
It's funny. So the town that I'm in is where Iron Brew is made. So if you actually look on the back of the can, obviously I can't imagine you've got one nearby, but it actually gives you the postcode G68, and it's honestly it's about a 5-minute drive here. So I actually know a few people who work for Iron Brew.
Oh yeah. Well, maybe we can, Dario can send you some export from Australia. Good stuff.
You got to get that good stuff. To be honest, I'm a diabetic, so I'm a sugar-free sort of guy. So it doesn't really matter to me anyway.
All good. Yeah, my question was with Octopus Deploy, I guess, what are the benefits over just vanilla GitHub Actions? Like, why would you use Octopus?
To be honest, great question, Will. See if you're working on if you're thinking that you're working on, say, like a personal project, or you're working on a fairly simplified approach. Honestly, our recommendation is use GitHub Actions to do your deployments. I think where Octopus really excels is taking the complex and making it and simplifying it. And also the thing is there's a few things as well, like one of the things is the dashboard, right? Like in GitHub Actions, where is that deployment? What version is in, that your Azure web app, etc. I think as well is also, there's a bunch of stuff with AWS as well. We're not as, we integrate with a lot of different platforms, but to be honest, the key thing for me is when you're operating at scale, you want to see exactly what's happening. When you've got a large team, what I find GitHub Actions is really great at is, maybe 1 or 2 people, maybe 3 people working on something, they go in and have a look. Whereas Octopus it's when you start building into teams, like for instance, this is just our webinar space. So obviously we can jump in and you can see lots of different spaces. So I did a webinar last year with Liquibase. Obviously thinking of this is just from a webinar, but it's a much better way to cut it up. And what we also do is simplify it, because one of the benefits is you can just do your deployment process once and then reuse it. Because to be honest, we use Octopus to deploy Octopus, and that deployment process actually uses parent and childs and tenants. So in actual fact, when someone deploys, so when you go to octopus.com/start, that's how you start a free trial. But that you go in, you type it in test.octopus.app or something like that. That'll go and spin all that up, all using Octopus. And that's all using a single deployment process, but with something like 25,000 tenants attached to it. So it takes the complex and it simplifies it and makes it a little bit more approachable.
Okay, thanks.
What is?
Well, I think we had a question from Matt. Sorry, Matt.
No, that's okay. Yeah, I just had a question. I noticed in the GitHub Actions towards the end, you actually created the release and you deployed it from the actual action. Yes. I'm just curious, in your travels and the different clients, is it normally triggered from the build process, or would you normally see the trigger being active from within Octopus itself, like when a new package is pushed in and would then automatically create a release there?
Yeah, to be honest, it really just depends on your use case. I'm personally a huge advocate. I'm personally a huge advocate of kicking off at least creating the release in Octopus. But to be honest, what you could do is just push your packages, Matt, and then do everything in Octopus. I'm a big fan of automating as much as I possibly can. If I can do it in my build process where I get to at least development or test, then that's my preference. The main reason is I would like to do lots of deployments. You know, obviously there's a common issue that people seem to think, oh, we'll do deployments every 6 months. It's less risky. What are you talking about? You know, obviously that's one of the things is more deployments, you know, like I recently did a webinar with Aura. Do you know Aura? The New Zealand-based crime prevention company?
No, I haven't used that tool.
Anyway, what they do is they deploy their Kubernetes stack 15 times a day, and they almost never have any issues. Because that's the thing. So what I can do, what I'd like is deploy. To be honest, there's actually a manual intervention here. If I could, I would kick it off and build, and it would just go straight to production, all the way through, obviously, with, you know, all your testing, etc. But yeah, basically my recommendation is do more deployments, reduce your risk, and be more successful with them. Does that sound good? Yeah,
sounds good. And also gives you decoupling as well between the build and deploy process potentially.
That's it. I think, to be honest, I like to get to at least test without anyone getting involved. You know, get it towards test. And I've actually got a cool use case here where I actually spin up the infrastructure every time I create the release. So the benefit of this approach is that you don't have to, you know, it's like, I remember back in the day, you know, I'm fairly sure 50% of the organizations still do this, if not more. Testing has to be on 24/7. You have to pay for all that hosting, whereas I can basically spin something up, test it, tear it all down, and it takes 15 minutes. So obviously you can reduce your hosting costs rather than, you know, having a server that sits in you know, someone's data center that sits on and barely gets used. So yeah, I'm about to show you some really cool. I like this because I like creating dynamic infrastructure on the fly so that we never have, you know, the amount of times you do something in test and then you get to production and it's not the same. Oh, what's different? Only these 17,000 things. So with this, I like to create everything on the fly, apart from production. Obviously, production scaling that dynamically is fine, but not creating it dynamically. Obviously, you want that, you know, things like blue-green deployments and stuff. No blue-green today, but I do have a demo of config as code for you as well.
Cool.
Awesome.
Tim, I think you have a question.
Yeah, I've got one which is just around. So with Octopus now, where does Octopus see itself strategically fitting into the whole DevOps landscape? And where's the roadmap taking it?
To be honest, with the product, there's lots of things in play just now. I'm sure you saw, obviously, that we had the Insight investment early last year. That effectively, I came on board in 2018. I was the first person in Europe to be hired. And to be honest, I was basically hired to start talking to people here. There was problems with scaling. So effectively I came on and I've kind of been working with that. We've really kind of nailed the product and that we now have ways to scale, because before, historically, everything was in a single space, you know, some of the few things, but some of the things that we're actually working on just now, Tim, is insights. So obviously with the DORA report, obviously everyone wants to be towards that elite status. So we're actually working on ways that we can actually show you that metric alongside that. We're doing things like config. We've just released config as code. It was a fairly long EAP, but we launched it last November. So basically what we're trying to do, and I think we're there, is that we think that we are the #1 DevOps automation tool in the world. It's ambitious, but honestly, I do believe, because obviously with things like spaces being added, Runbooks where you can automate your operations tasks, because that's where I come from. I come from operations. Don't tell anybody, but I actually prefer Runbooks over the deployments, because I can do things like, you know, one of the things so a cool thing about Runbooks is a couple of years ago, just after Runbooks was our Octopus.com was actually having some reliability issues. So what I did is I wrote a little, honestly, it was quick and dirty. It was not a great solution long term. But what I just did is wrote a runbook that checked for a 200. If it was 200, so obviously just check the website, make sure it was fine. If that all came back, yep, cool. If it didn't, it actually just restarted the web app. And it's dirty, it's horrible, but you know what? It fixed the website every time it went down until we could figure out what it was. It was actually a third-party provider that was timing out, that was causing our web app to fall over. But also, just one thing just to be aware of is roadmap. Everything here is on the roadmap. So we're going to be doing things with serverless. There'll be we made our first acquisition, the Dist announcement. We made that in January. We're also going to be bringing on things like dynamic infrastructure, where you can just create the infrastructure without even touching a bit of ARM. If any of you have used ARM templates, you'll realize how annoying they are. But at the same time, again, how powerful they are. We've also got things like Servicenow. Config as code for Runbooks will be out later in the year as well. I will show you some config as code, and we have just actually launched an integration with BuildKite. You know, Australians, it's like the Australian CI/CD stack, and I love it. So obviously BuildKite are also an Australian company as well.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. And so at this point, let's actually have a little bit of a look at Octopus. So the good thing is obviously everything is deployed. So this is one of the benefits is, so I'm just going to come in, and as you can see, you've got the project. So one thing just to be up is this is config as code. So you can see here that you've got your branch switcher. So you select fetch. I've actually deleted the last branch there, so you won't be able to do this. One thing with config as code, and I love this, is when I used to use Octopus, it'd be like I'd go in and I'd have to make all the updates using, I'd have to go into the each of the steps and maybe change the name or doing so. Now, what I can do is effectively do in here OCL, and then there is our entire deployment process in a single window. Again, you can also just branch off. You can do it in code as well, visual code. So that's definitely something here. So what you can see is all of the steps all in a single window. And one thing is we have created OCL, which is a Octopus configuration language. We do have a code plugin that you can use that will help you write that as well. So you don't have to do it in the UI anymore. You can sit in code and actually write your deployment process. The thing I love is you can test it. So I can branch off into a different deployment process, test it on maybe a subset of machines, make sure that, do my PR, bring it back in, bring it into main, and then basically move on the rest of my day. So that's just something, this is something that we only launched in the last few weeks. And Runbooks version will be out later this year, which will be really exciting. There'll be a bunch of other things, like for instance, at the moment, variables, library variable sets, tenants, they're not config as code, but we do have a Terraform provider that I just finished a webinar late last night on, that if you want to use Octopus at scale, you can actually, you can Terraform Octopus, which is really cool as well. So what we've got here is, we've actually got a deployment process. So it is, yes, Glenn, it is almost identical to HCL. What we looked at a few things, and to be honest, Jason was on the table. I think they even looked at XML. I was busy that day. I was like, no. So I think like OCL, they looked at HCL. HCL, honestly, it looked like it would fit. But the thing is in case we ever diverge further down the line, that's why. So if you look at OCL, you'll find that it looks a lot like HCL. So that's just something to be aware of. But yeah. Thanks, Glenn. So what we've got here is, this is actually run a runbook step. So effectively what's happening is I have a step which effectively just runs a runbook, and you've seen earlier on, I could have actually done that as well from GitHub Actions. So what I could have done is just used the run the runbook and actually provisioned it as part of the build as well. Where you do this is really up to yourself. But the main thing I'd say is create the infrastructure using Runbooks. So what I've got is a bunch of variables that I use. Variables are ways obviously to make it reusable. So what I've got is this actually connects to the Octopus Deploy API and creates the infrastructure. And what I've got is I only run this for test. I don't run, so this could quite easily be for development as well, but I only ever run this for test. Why? Because I only ever want to change the infrastructure or create that on the fly. It does increase your deployment time by about 8 minutes because it's creating that. So what we've got here is when you create the release and deploy it as part of test, it will actually go and create the infrastructure for you. And I'll show you that runbook in a wee moment. And then one thing here is there's a health check. When we create the release, there's actually no deployment targets. So as part of the deployment process, we have to actually use dynamic infrastructure. And as part of that, we have to do a health check to make sure that the deployment targets are ready. And you'll see that. And then this one, I'm still a little unsure of. With the manual interventions, I like manual interventions. I come from operations where almost everything has to be approved. So what we've got here is, this is basically the bit that will stop you automatically releasing all the way through to production. So that's something that you could do, no problem. But in this instance, generally I find the most people will still approve before you go to production. But if you can remove this and build and use mainline development, then yeah, then go ahead. So this only runs, the next few steps are all very similar. We're just deploying, so obviously we've built our package, we're just deploying it to an Azure web app. So these all look very similar. The main thing is I'm just basically doing it on different bits. So I'll skip over the next few. Then lastly, we're deploying the database. This is running on a worker. This is all, so you've got your usual .NET configuration values, you've got transforms. How you do that is entirely up to yourself, but it's flexible enough. And that's one of the key things I like about Octopus is because we don't have a CI server and we don't have our own hosting, we have to integrate with everything. I think that's one of the key benefits that we have over other products. And then lastly, I'm printing out the URL because I'm lazy and I don't like going into Azure and trying to find out URL. So I've just created a variable that will print it out using Markdown so I can click it. I know clicking is the devil, but sometimes it's nice too. So all I've done here is just straight up using some PowerShell, and then from here some Markdown, and I click it out. And then this is the bit that I like. This really, really will cut down your hosting costs as well. So with this, you have your manual intervention. You probably wonder why you got a manual intervention or an approval step at the end of your deployment process. Lastly, because once you've tested it, you want to click on it, go in and test whatever changes you've made. You know, if you accept them, you can actually come in, approve the manual, and then it will destroy all your infrastructure that you've just created. So if you're fly, you know, you could probably, instead of having your testing on for 2 hours, all 24 hours, you could have it on for potentially 27 minutes a day. That's just obviously a number I made up. And then what will happen once you approve that, it will go ahead and destroy all the infrastructure. So let's have a look at infrastructure. What we should see, yes, we have test. Here is, we have a Bastion box, which I use as a worker pool, and here. What you tend to do is with the database deployments, you don't normally run them on your server. We normally recommend that you do it on a jump box, or so that's generally a recommendation. So you'll not notice that the database server is actually registered here as a deployment target. Okay, so one moment, right? So here we go. You've got the orange eye. What does that mean? We're at the point where we require a manual intervention. So what we've done here is we've ran the infrastructure, we've created the infrastructure, we've deployed, so obviously we've ran the health check, it's deployed the Azure Octo Pet Shop web app, then the product service, and then there we go, it's clicked out the link. I'm crossing my fingers and my toes. This is a bit where it all breaks, doesn't it? This is well, we'll see. Okay. Yes, well. It normally does spin up a little bit. It does normally load by now. I'm getting the sweat. Yeah, We'll come back to that. This will be my Blue Peter moment. I'll come back and talk about it later. But so what I'm now doing is I'm going to yes, Glenn, it is public. So I'll give you here you go. I'll just pop this in the chat for you. There you go. That's so this is all public. You can one thing just to be aware of as well is you can actually even log into our webinar instance as well. So if you go to webinar.octopus.app, you can actually come in and have a look at this as I'm doing it. So that's just something to be aware of. We actually also, just one thing, if you are also looking at another one, I used to work in the customer solutions team. So I've done a lot of Octopus consultancy. You can also use samples.octopus.app. So if you use I am a guest, the webinar.octopus.app is normally just where we store our but if you actually can see a whole bunch of samples. So definitely check that out. We actually have it on our website as well. So let's have a look. I'm just going to get started. This is something we've only just launched. I know what's the samples instance here? It is here as well. So if you want to see a particular sample, you can actually see. So if you've got AWS, you want to see secrets management, you want to see MySQL examples, you can click in and have a little bit of a play about. PostgreSQL's there, SQL, Azure. It's a big document. There's lots of samples, and it's all, you can go in and click about all of them. So obviously with that, there's bits on Runbooks, there's things on Kubernetes. Really, if it's something that can be deployed, there's probably a sample for it. And if we don't have a sample for you, get in touch with us at advice@octopus.com, and we'll probably we can get something set up for you as well. But yeah, this is all. And just in time, look at that. We have our dogs. $100 for a dog. Well, my last dog cost me £2,000. So yeah, I would definitely buy all the dog. But an actual fact, and this is a pretty cool thing, is I just picked this little. You'll see this just up here. Is I did actually buy the octopus. Oh, let me see. Look at this. Can you see that? It's we have the octopus plushies, but I did actually also go and buy a big bad, but I call him Ollie the Octopus. So yeah. So I have actually bought Octo Pet Shop in real life. And then obviously, you can get your $15 for a goldfish. Somebody's robbing me there. But yeah, so obviously we've got that in test. One thing that I use is I actually heavily rely on Octopus variables. So one of the things that we with Octopus, you have a bunch of built-in variables, things like space name or space ID. You'll notice here in the URL. That didn't help, is test-speaking-octopetshop-web. Test is the environment, speaking is the name of the space, Octopetshop is the name of the project, and web is the name of the function. So that's just something to be aware of. When you can actually use a lot of built-in variables to really make it easier. I know when I go on, sometimes you go into Azure or AWS, it's actually really difficult to it's really difficult sometimes to specify, find out what infrastructure is where and what projects it's for. So that's just something to be aware of. So at this point, we actually have a working deployment. So I will show you this goes down. Yes, I see it. Well, I love it. Yes, Octo plushies all round. Hiya. That's awesome. So at this point, what's now going to happen is it's going to run the runbook, and then we'll actually come down, have a little look here. We can see. Oh, wait a minute. Runbooks should be. Oh, overview. Let's see. Should be tearing everything down. Let's see. Oh, so what this is doing is this is all in Octopus Cloud. With Octopus Cloud, you actually have dynamic workers. So what it's now doing is it's going to go and lease a worker and then run through it, much like you do with GitHub. So what this is now doing is it's giving all the information. What we should now see is if we come on over, there we go. It's destroying the infrastructure for test. So whilst this is happening, I'm going to jump in and I'll have a little look. So what I'll do is obviously I use notes normally just to give you this. What we've got is the destroy infrastructure. All this effectively does is run a PowerShell script, and it deletes the app from Octopus, because one of the things, or if you're removing an infrastructure, make sure that you remove it from Octopus as well, because it becomes very hard to find stuff if you don't delete that, and also it will account towards that. So what we've got here is we're deleting, we're actually deleting the web, the shopping cart service, and the product service, and then lastly we're just running a little bit of CLI to actually, so we're basically deleting the group. So there we go. And then what we have lastly is a create infrastructure. So the create infrastructure, this process is ran only as part of the test, like I was saying. What this basically does is it uses a combination of different steps, but for the most part, it's all Azure or script steps. So what I'm doing here is I'm using some PowerShell. I really can't wait for this to be in config as code, mostly so I can just show you in a single file. So what this basically does is it just uses a little bit of PowerShell, effectively just creates the resource group. It just creates the resource group if it's not available, if it's not there. Then at this point, we're using ARM templates as well. So obviously there's a lot of ARM. I use Octopus variables for our parameters, so things like the database username, the password, the Azure location name. So we use that. The main thing is I try not to hard code anything, because hard coding is the devil and it doesn't scale well. So what we've now got is some ARM template here where we're creating the empty database. So we've created the Azure SQL Server. We're deploying an empty database using let's just have a look, creating infrastructure, the process. So effectively what this will do is it will deploy the Azure SQL Server. Much like anything, when it comes to SQL, this is the longest thing that happens. Deploying the empty database using ARM, then creating the app service, which will contain 3 apps. So that the app service will keep the product service, the web app, and lastly the shopping cart service. And then what we're then doing is we're then registering it over the API. So we'll create the infrastructure and then register it in Octopus using PowerShell, because that's one of the things, you can't deploy it unless it's in Octopus. And then lastly, we're just doing that for all of the apps, and then that's basically it. And as you can see, this is like March 22nd. And as test is gone, this should work, and we're gone. So obviously test is gone, no smoke and mirrors here. So yeah, so at this point, we've went through the create infrastructure, the destroy infrastructure. We've got config as code. At this point, I'm now going to just create and deploy to production. One of the benefits here is you can also just have this. So if you see a successful deployment and test and run through your tests, you could actually make it so that it's automatically triggered to production. You would use your life cycle for that, and that's something that you can definitely do. So this is the manual intervention. Generally, obviously for production, you don't want to stop deployments before that. It looks good to me. And then select proceed. And then at this point, it's going to run through your deployment process. It's going to deploy the web app, the product service web app, the shopping cart, and the database. And then it'll print out the URL. I'll click it. Hopefully, it'll wait for 30 seconds, and then hopefully it'll load. So one thing just to be aware of is, let's have a look. Whilst that's happening, let's jump on over to code. So one thing is, obviously, as I showed you earlier on, we've got let's close a few of these. One thing is, obviously, we do have some documentation on how to use the GitHub action. Thank you very much, Ben. So one thing just to be is I have enabled config as code. So just one thing here is I have, obviously we specify the Git name, the default branch, authentication, and then obviously you can store your Git file. I have just set this up as me, but if you did want to, you can set up a service account. So effectively you could set up a service account, so you don't have to set up the authentication. You know, you get rid of a PAT token and then suddenly everything breaks. So this is something that you can do, and our general recommendation is to do that. But what you could do is, I'll just give you a little demo, is say for instance, I come in, no, that's sorry, deployment process. I can come in and just say for this, say what we'll do is, I'm just going to read test, create infrastructure for test environment. There we go. So at this point, I'm going to do commit. I'm going to do updating runbook name. So commit to a new branch. So we'll do this. Devops, Derek, patch, perf, talk. Hit commit. And then what you'll see is obviously we have this new, and if we switch it back to main, it should go back there. And then what you can do is you can do your pull request, bring us in, and obviously update your deployment process. I just like this because it means I can make changes locally. Again, I can also come down, do my git pull, make my changes, check it in, do the PR, and my Octopus Deploy process is also set up as well. So it's something that we're going to be focusing on going forward, is everything. And to be honest, I'm sure, as you all know as well, everything is moving towards code. To be honest, I'm half expecting that, you know, coffee is code at some point. You know, it's kind of like that hipster. Remember, obviously, when they deconstruct your coffee? That's the way I kind of see all this. But at this point, we've went through, we've created obviously we've ran the GitHub action, we've created infrastructure for test, done the deployment to test, tested it, and then obviously there's we've created all the infrastructure, and production has completed in 4 minutes. So as you can see, what we've got is prod speaking. Oh, me too, Will. Honestly, this is something we've been working on it for about the last 2.5 years now. This process has been dragged over the coals many times, and it's such a nice. The thing I like about it is it puts the power of your of you configuring your deployment process wherever you want it. Right? There's people who like clicking about. You know, like, hey, like, you know, like me personally, I'm somewhere in the middle. Like, it depends on the mood I am. If I want to make just a quick update, yeah, I'll probably just use the UI. If I want to make huge updates, code is you know, use or Sublime Text, where you're making mass edits. That's best done in a text editor. So with that, obviously, if you're writing this, then I would definitely recommend using code and our new IntelliSense plugin as well. That should help you out. But yeah, so with that, we have a working deployment to prod. And one thing just to be aware of, with the variables, these are all set. So you've got things like the sensitive variables. I'm specifying the product service base URL so that it can interact and add things and look up products. So obviously bits here as well, and you can map these to many different things. And lastly, I'm a huge fan of library variable sets. So the more you can put up in a global environment variable set, is obviously the less you have to make changes at the project. So at that point, I think I've done everything that I was hoping to do. Do we have any other questions? I like that, Will.
Doesn't sound like it, Derek.
I'll call that a win.
Maybe I'll ask you one just from my ignorance. Can you explain the concept of variable sets there?
I certainly can. So variables, effectively what you would normally do is, I remember I've been using Octopus since 2012, and variables were almost always at the project level, which for the most part does work when you've got 10, 15, 20. When suddenly you've got hundreds, you know, like think about it, like say for instance, think about it as a few different things, like Azure. Say for instance you have a space, you probably use, say you just use Azure. In this instance, what we've got is things like the location. We can set the network name that we want to use. So obviously with that, you would kind of logically group them together. So with the variable sets, it's a way for you to effectively, you can stack them. So I'll have a look. So you've got Azure and global. So I could create, say, 10 of those. Say for instance, you use Slack and you want to enable Slack notifications for all of your projects. I would recommend at that point that you actually put it into a library variable set. And then what you do is you come into the project, select Octopus, this, and then what you can do is expand out variables. You've got your project variables, which you can see. So things like your app settings, database admin, all that sort of stuff. What you can do is you actually, when you do it, you can actually include certain variable sets. So like say, for instance, I didn't want to use the global variable set. I could just uncheck this and then that's it. It would break my deployments because I am heavily using it in every single bit of it. But yeah, so the idea really is just to make variables a little bit easier. Set as many as you can at the parent level and as few as you can at the project level. And that will generally give you a good spot to be in and to enable you to scale as well.
Cool.
Glenn, I'm very sad about that too. But effectively what we've had to do is we've just had to descope a bunch of stuff so that we can get it out. Runbooks as code should be out by the end of the year as well. I know that it's something that's actually been actively developed as I speak.
Also another question about variables.
Okay.
Is there a way that you can search for a variable across multiple projects or multiple variable sets? Because I just noticed there's an all in the variable submenu there. I'm just curious if that's...
all is effectively the combination of what you have. So it would be the combination of your project variables and the library variable sets. It's kind of similar to the preview as well. So like if you come in, preview doesn't work with config as code, but effectively what this is, and it gives you the ability, and obviously you can set, so say for instance global, right? And one second, I'm just so you can search it, so that's all variables. So that's just something to be aware. You can search through it, so advanced filter, scope. So if you only want to see things for like test, so that is a way to do that, Glenn, is you can effectively, because that's one of the things is that's why we recommend, because we've went in and we've actually saw that people have configured something like 1,000 variables on a project, and you're just like, how do you even look at that? So that's the thing. That's why the library variable sets came about. But yeah, so yeah, you can just use all and actually search it. But the biggest thing I would recommend as well is also using a good naming convention. So for instance, if you have the global one, name it, everything in that variable step global dot. And then same idea, if it's an Azure one, Azure dot, if it's notifications dot, it allows then the traceability, because what we've seen in the past is when you have bad naming conventions, it becomes very hard to track, and where's that coming? It might be set at the parent project, the library variable set, but also you might have created something very, very similar as part of your project. So actually using library variable sets should make your life easier.
Right,
Simon.
okay.
Oh, any other bits, Matt?
So I didn't catch that.
Any other bits?
Oh, somebody else.
Yes, Simon.
We're using Octopus, and our variable sets are starting to grow reasonably large. I'm just wondering if there's ways to manage them. You're bringing in config as code. Is that something that's going to happen for variables? Because sometimes we might want to do a mass update or something like that. I know there's an API, but it's okay for getting variables in as a list, but to try and update them as a list, it's not quite as useful.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, to be honest. With the updates, it's good for listing out or reading them so that you know what they are. I found that updating them can be a little bit tricky. So yes, the plans, to be honest, one thing also to think about as well is also the Terraform provider. I literally finished a webinar last night at 10:30 on our Terraform provider. So you could use variables as well, the idea is, I think by the end of the year, we should have more things as code. So variables and library variable sets is definitely something you can do once it's available. you can also do it with the Terraform provider as well. So we released a Terraform provider in early January 2021. So what you could do there is actually use the Terraform provider to update those for you. What I would say is, this is actually, I can share this with you because I've only just published the one thing just to be aware of. If you want to find out about the Octopus Terraform provider, I would check this webinar out. Oh, sorry about that. I'd check that out because what they do is they actually use, the solutions team actually do some really, really cool stuff with the Terraform provider. And with your variable sets, what you can do is use Terraform to specify and update them. It might be an approach. I would check it out. And if you do want to find out more about that, Bob's team, he's the VP of customers. He's my old boss, effectively. He's a wizard when it comes to this sort of stuff. If you reach out to advice@octopus.com, they can jump in and give you some advice on that. But what they effectively do is, when you go to samples, when you go to the samples instance, you'll notice certain things are created now all by Terraform. So like say here, this actually, so they use the Octopus Terraform provider to update all of the variable sets and standardize it. So that's maybe something, Simon, I would check out.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Awesome. Any other questions? Well, hopefully he's learned some. Thank you. I hope you learned some stuff.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you, Derek. Thanks for spending the time with us this evening and your morning. Thanks for also dealing well with our little intruder earlier, but managed to get things back on track. Well done.
It's definitely a story I may share with others.
Yeah.
Honestly, thank you so much for having me. If you ever want to find out more about Octopus, just give us a shout. Always happy, and I hope you enjoyed the GitHub Actions side of things as well. But if I can ever help, just get in touch.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Derek.
Thanks everyone for coming along. Everyone have a good night, and hopefully we'll see you at the next event.
All the best.
Thanks all.
Cheers.
Thanks, Derek. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks. Catch you later.